Hey, good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. Early morning here on Tuesday, June 7th, coming to you at 8 a.m. from the Central Time Zone, where I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Robb Ryerse is, somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. And we're Randi McCallian, who's going to be our guest, who's running for Congress in Missouri. All of us in the Central Time Zone. So good morning, bright and early. It's like having a job, when you have to be at a meeting at 8 a.m., right? Who does 8 a.m. meetings? Well, to those of you on the East Coast, hi, mid-morning. And of course, those of you living out West, you're not even up yet. So we've been at it for a while. Hey, Randi, we always chat about the weather for a second before we ask people about the important things like why are you running for Congress and what kind of change can you make in the world and what does it look like to be a candidate? So beautiful summer day here in Minneapolis. And we like to chat about the weather because it's one of the things a lot of us hold in common is that we at least experience the same sky. Rob, how are things there in Arkansas?
It's okay. I think we've got some storms brewing, so it's a little bit overcast now. We're at that point now where it's hot and wet, which just muggy, we're heading into that season where, I'm the type of person who can sweat just sitting still. So, where that's the season we're headed into, but that's summer in the South. So that's all right.
And Randi, how about in Southern Missouri? How's it feeling?
Well, I will not complain about the wet and the water and the rain that we continuously get here because that's one of the reasons we left Colorado was the drought and the fires and no rain and no ability to set up a farm and plant trees. So, but it is wet and rainy and just now heating up and getting muggy.
Well, hey, speaking of wet and muggy, some people think that when they think about Congress, they're like, hey, why would anybody ever want to put themselves into that swamp of a mess, right? That's the attitude a lot of people have about politics. They think it doesn't really serve people well. You, Randi, you must have a different attitude because you want to make it better and you believe that something can change. And so once again, you've offered yourself as a candidate for election this time in the 8th Congressional District in Missouri, in rural Missouri. Talk to us about why it is that you want to be a congressperson.
I will agree with you that this is my cat's ear you're going to see over here now. Nice. I will agree with you that Congress isn't working for us, and I think it's a little wet and muggy as well. But that's one of the reasons I'm running is I really want to see more representation in our government from real people who are doing the work down here at the bottom of the ladder. And so that's one of the reasons why I got into political advocacy and started running for office is because I've been doing the work at the bottom of the ladder in maternal and child health for quite some time now, at least 10 to 20 years. And I saw doing that work at the bottom with people in early Head Start, and I worked with kids with challenges like autism and how to navigate this world we have. And all those people at the bottom knew the answers that we needed from the top. Wow. And after a fair amount of time, I started seeing that those answers were not going to happen unless those of us at the bottom made it to the top.
How did this decision come to you that you were going to run? Like, how does somebody in your situation say, hey, I've got a career path, I'm doing good work, there's contribution I'm making to the world, I want to now pivot that for all the complexities that it is to run for, like, it's one thing to be an elected representative, right? Because then you have influence and you can serve people and all. Running for office, on the other hand, you have all this work to do on top of whatever else you were doing. Like, a lot of people think, well, that's a good way to make a living, to run for office. Not a very good way to make a living. Often you have to do other things to keep your life going. Talk to us about those decisions that you were having to make, and what finally was it that made you say, no, I know what this is like. I've run before, and I really am wanting to do it again.
I think like most people for a long time, I didn't want to be political. I didn't see myself in politics. But I have a mom who taught public schools, history, and US government, 7th and 8th grade, for 15 to 20 years. And I think that really showed me that the government is mine to be shaped and shifted, that we own our government, but we absolutely have the ability to lose our government. And when I began seeing that things like paid family leave, legal and safe midwifery care, having doula services, which is a support person in childbirth, having doula services paid for by health insurance because they make statistics better, they make birth better, they make it cost less. And those things weren't happening. And so I started finding out how we make that happen. And having a mom who taught US history and government really gave me the confidence and know-how that I could find those answers. It was the 2016 election that really pushed me to find more groups and people who were doing political advocacy outside of my maternal and child health interest area. And a wonderful group of very motivated moms started helping people gather at our representatives' offices, and they would give you information about what talking to the staff is like. And then we would all be able to go up with partners and start talking to our representatives and our senators, or their staff at least. And that really was what I think was the final step in me seeing how accessible my representatives actually are. And I don't mean that, to sound like they're always accessible, because I know that many of them don't listen to us and they aren't doing what they're supposed to. But you really can just call or show up at their office during hours and talk to their staff. And we started building relationships with their staff, and that propelled me to work on campaigns in my local area. And so I lived in Colorado Springs at the time, in Colorado. And contrary to what many people might think, that is not a blue Democratic area. The state Senate seat that I ran for has never elected a Democrat before. They still did not, but that's okay. We didn't expect it right away. So as I worked on campaigns and saw that I could do that, I decided it was time for me to run for office as well, because there is no better way to learn how to do something than to do it and to learn from it. And you mentioned the challenges of running, that there's not always great benefits from it, maybe in some ways, compared to the struggle. But I will even challenge that further, that I've chosen to run for office in districts that most Democrats wouldn't even run for. And groups like our state Democratic Party, and now for Congress, the DNC, they don't even blink an eye at these races, because there's just no chance you're going to win it. We don't care what you're doing. But the reason why I run for these seats is because we have more to gain here than in those seats that you only need to move a point or two. And even though in those seats you get one person elected when you move that seat, in the seat like this one, we can change the entire scope or the entire picture of what Missouri looks like if we organize the 8th, and if we turn out state house district candidates, state senate candidates, and eventually this congressional seat. and even down to local level, county commissioners, city councilors. We have all of that to gain here in Missouri's 8th district, and not just a couple points.
Yeah. Oh, Randy, I love what you're saying. It's so, we often, when we think about polarization, we think about how non-competitive some congressional seats are. And we often blame gerrymandering, and it's absolutely part of the problem for sure, but it's not the only thing causing this. We have the sense that, we're getting fewer and fewer competitive congressional seats as, lines get redrawn, and I think you're absolutely right that when we don't have contested races, it just calcifies a district and causes, people who could be engaged to not be engaged nearly as much. And one of the things we talk about at Vote Common Good is that the message matters, but so does the messenger. And when there are really great candidates who are running, in races that, this is, oftentimes it's a long-term effort, right? What they do is they invite people to consider doing something that they've never done before, voting differently than they have. And that can be a part of a shift. And if people are never given that opportunity, those shifts might not happen. And so I think it's absolutely critical that we have, that you don't cede any ground, that you contest races up and down the ballot all across the country in places where, the smart money is, well, you don't want to waste any time or effort on that. I think there's some benefit in wasting the time and effort on that. Not that anybody's wasting, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's
So I'm
not
curious, we
always-
often talk to folks that are running for the first time. You're running for the second time. I'm curious, like, I know when I ran for Congress, it felt like I was making it up as I went along. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I'm curious, like, how it's different running a campaign the second time around. Like, are there a couple of things that you learned the first time that you're doing differently the second time that, folks that maybe have never run for office, they go, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of how you do that differently.
That's a great question. And, to touch on something that you said, if we don't have people running up and down the ballot to have those choices on our ballot, something I hear, especially in an area like this, is, well, people always vote Republican. And I have to stop a second and go, well, that's the only choice they have.
Yeah. Yep.
There's literally no one else on the ballot. So of course they're voting Republican.
Yeah.
So last campaign, I started running very early. I started in like March or April of 2019 for the November 2020 election. And the reason I did that was to have a lot of time to build my confidence, to set up everything I needed to. I was very nervous and uncomfortable with fundraising, and many women are. Many women are very uncomfortable asking for money. And I knew that was a barrier and a challenge for me that I needed to work through. And so I gave myself more time to build that confidence, build those skills, and learned a whole heck of a lot. And so running this second time, not by design, I have much less time. I wasn't anticipating running for anything quite yet in Missouri, as I'm fairly new. And when no one was running for this congressional seat, and it's my home, it's my district, and I saw that if no one was running, then no one has the skills or time to run at this level. And I do. And so if I can help people in this district to gain those skills through my campaign, that's important. If I can inspire other people in my district to run for a seat after they see someone like me do it, it's worth it. And something I learned in my last campaign that is very worth it and important for this campaign is that when we organize down ballot and we have exciting and motivating and connecting candidates down ballot, we can win up ballot seats.
Yes.
And so my Colorado campaign, I ran in a very red area and none of the Democrats won there, but we filled our ballot and all the way up at the top, we replaced Cory Gardner with a Democrat. And we also got President Biden instead of the former guy. And I think that's another really important thing not enough people talk about when it comes to running for office, is that when you turn out and organize and inspire and connect with an area that is as red and Republican as this one is, you change up ballot races, and that's important. So the last thing I'll say that I've changed running this second time is I'm more confident. I knew the steps that needed to be taken right away. So we were able to go a lot faster setting up our infrastructure and connections. One difference I'm doing this time is I'm not working quite so hard for endorsements. And I felt in my last campaign that I spent an ungodly amount of time on questionnaires, interviews. I mean, some of those questionnaires took me 3 hours. And in the end, most of them didn't amount to anything besides a little image and thank you for running. And it wasn't even money, or if it was $100. And I could have gotten $100 calling voters in that 3 hours.
So that being said, you're absolutely right. There's that sense that like, oh, I'll get this endorsement and it'll be so much help. The cavalry is not coming, like it's
not how it works.
That being said, Randy, you are a candidate for common good and and filled out our little form and have our little image. So I'm curious, why being a candidate for common good was something that was important to you.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. So I am prioritizing much better what I am going to seek and whose support or whose people that I need. And in this campaign, it's really important to me that we are connecting with people who Democrats haven't connected well with. Now, technically, that's my whole district, really. But I was seeking out, and when I came to, or was connected to, I was connected with Vote Common Good by Spencer Toder. And it really made sense to me because of some of the things you and I have talked about now, where I noticed in my last campaign in Colorado, which was in a very evangelical religious district, there were a lot of mothers who vote Republican, but wanted to vote for me. And when it came down to it, they were struggling with just a couple policy topics the Democrats were holding dearly to. And I felt the frustration that the party as a whole was ruining my chance to gain voters who trusted me personally. And so one reason why I'm running for office and why I'm engaged in the Democratic Party is because I want to see it shift. I want to see this party represent more people. I want to see this party represent real grassroots, bottom of the ladder, working their butts off. I want our party to represent them and not the ruling class elites. And Vote Common Good is one of the organizations that I see is bridging those gaps between people who vote Democratic and people who vote Republican.
Well, that's nice to hear. Thank you. We're trying to do that work, so it's really means a lot to hear you say that. There's if you're in a district, I don't know what your district is voting Republican versus Democrat. Typically, is it 70% Republican? Is it 60,
Pretty
80?
close.
Do you know? 70?
65, 70.
Yeah, so you get 65%. Well, that's a huge number when it comes to like politics, right? That's just a long way for a win. But if you get in a room with 100 random people from your district, it's a little hard to tell 65% from 35%, right? Like just normal people, you might be sitting around and, there's 3 people over there that might vote this way and 4 people over here. It might be a mix. The reality of where people's lived experiences are and how they think about the world is really different than the turnout as it's the voter turnout as it's related to getting 50% plus 1 vote, right? That thing, that math that politics demands and pushes us to. And because the majority of people in many of these districts don't vote, either because they're not yet eligible, like their children, or or people that are just uninterested, it's not even entirely true that 65% of people wouldn't support the things you're thinking about and so on. So if we start thinking about, as you are, the system and what access people have and who's advocating on their behalf, it really changes the equation, right? It just says, hey, think about this as people organizing, not just as getting to 50% of the population and then add one voter or 18 voters or 1,000 voters, so that you just squeak out a win or win rather easily. I'm interested, Randy, in your profession is midwifery. Is that right? Am I saying that right? No.
Close. I'm not a midwife. They require extra special clinical training, but I am highly trained in maternal and child health.
What do you know about the human experience from that world? Right, the world that you learn from midwives and doulas and mother's health that is just instinctual to you now, and you're wanting to bring that into the equation, right? Because a lot of our institutions, especially our political institutions, they don't tend to have they're not known for being very nurturing very often. A lot of times people run into these things and they feel like a really mechanical kind of system. What do you feel like from your area of expertise that would be so powerful for our government to learn and to know?
I love that. That's great. I would say trust mothers. Listen to women. Listen to mothers when they're a mother, of course. A lot of people now are leaving our healthcare system when it comes to maternal and child health because they aren't being nurtured and mothered through birth, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, because we call it sometimes mothering the mother. I think remembering that in birth, not only is a baby born, but a mother is born, a family is born, a father is born, grandparents are born, aunties and uncles are born. You're literally creating a whole new network of connection, a whole new thread in the tapestry that unites us all. And it is such a monumental time that we have not treated with respect and dignity as we should. And I think that I know that holds true up and down our system, that we are not treating people with enough respect and dignity for the place that they are in their life, for the transitions that they are going through, the growth that they are doing. We aren't doing well enough to hold space sometimes and to provide support for whatever major transition or minor transition, because a transition is a transition. And with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, I can confirm that even minor transitions are difficult and worthy of praise. But another piece of that, then, to step back further, is more of us need to trust our gut. We need to trust that voice inside of us, guiding us to what's right, to what will help others, and to also protect and help ourselves so that we can help others. And I personally am very good at trusting my gut. I listen to that voice inside of me, that thread that pulls me down the path I'm meant for. And it has not steered me wrong. I love my life. I love the path I'm on and the places I get to go. Each door that opens, running for office gives me a lot of anxiety, but it's so worth it for the people that I meet, the connections I make in my own neighborhoods, and for the challenges that we face in this country and on this planet right now. Our neighbors, our community, the people around us, that is where we need to have our focus, and that is what we need to be strengthening, because when push comes to shove, when climate change comes to food crisis, it's our neighbors and our community and our friends around us that we can help and can help us.
So good. Yeah. So glad you're running, and we're glad to be part of your birthing team for you as you put together this run. And because that's such a beautiful imagery that when a baby is born, so are all of these other relationships born. That is really powerful. And we see that through life. And you would hope, boy, that politics could be similar, right? That it wouldn't have to be just simply a power game of one side winning and another side getting their way and all the rest of it. That instead it would be something where something new is now made possible, and a new set of relationships and a new set of practices could now be available to people. Such a great way to think about life. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Thanks you guys for helping me birth my baby campaign.
Yeah. Hey, Randy, give us shameless plug time. Tell, if folks are listening and want to learn more about you and your campaign, how can they do that?
So I have a great website set up that is, we're growing it all the time, but I'm at randimccallian.com, and that's RandimMccallian.com. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, though not so good at Facebook, but laying in bed last night, I just figured out who I'm going to have run my Facebook channel with me now. So it should be.
Do they know that? Do they know that yet? Or is this going to be something they're going to learn about today?
Yes, they're next on my agenda.
Great. Can't wait to hear.
So yes, I got my website. I'm active on Twitter. I would love to hear from anyone in the district, and I've been scheduling phone calls with folks and listening. I have a lot to learn about Missouri's 8th district and the people who have lived here most of their lives, their whole lives, or are new here, newer like me. I really want to hear what you see, what you know, what you felt, what you understand about living here in Southeast Missouri, and what we need to make us stronger and to revitalize our beautiful district with our small towns that are so filled with memory, and I believe they deserve to be filled with opportunity as well.
Great line.
And
great
line. We've been working on it.
Good. Yeah. I mean, you should work
Yeah.
on it, right? It's like everybody, it's just getting good at your job, and it's a powerful thing. All right. So people can go to randymccallian.com. They can volunteer. They can get involved other ways, I would imagine, too, even if they don't live in your district or are coming through. So friends, we'd love for you to keep up on all that.
Anyone can donate. I think there's some confusion in our system right now, because both of my campaigns, I've heard a lot of people act as though they can't donate for this or that reason. And so I think it's important that people know, even if it's not to me, you can donate to any candidate across the country at any level of office, as long as you are 18 and a U.S. citizen. Though I will revise that and say I just learned that you can donate to my congressional campaign at 16 years old.
Oh, good. Get those summer job kids out there, chipping in a little something for their future. I like the idea of that. And look, you don't have to live in a state to contribute to somebody running the state. And as Dr. Oz is showing, you don't have to live in a state to even run for Senate in that state. So don't feel like these states are holding anybody back. You can contribute from any state to Randy's campaign.
That too here in Missouri. Josh Hawley doesn't live here.
Josh Hawley doesn't live in Missouri. Come on, really? Oh boy, that's shocking. That the Harvard educated non-elitist doesn't actually live in Missouri.
Right.
Well, after you get done with this one, let's talk about you running for Senate and letting Josh Hawley take his dim little light and let it shine somewhere else and stop bothering the good people of Missouri and the United States. We'll take care of that one next. Randy, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Randy.
Hey, and Jim Eaton and Kay. Jim, by the way, up bright and early in California. First minute was good morning from California. So it was 6 a.m. when we started all this. So Kay and Jim both say good luck. Really glad to see that you're running and excited that you're in this. And so are the rest of us. So thanks for running.
Thanks. It was great to spend this morning with you guys.
Enjoy the rest of your morning. Hey, the rest of you, we still have lots of things to talk about here about politics, a lot going on in our political world. Election day is I don't know what it is, 1,500 days away. Yeah. Well, today
is primary day all across
7 states.
The country.
Yeah. 7 states.
Yeah,
Iowa, California, New Jersey. Wow. Big places.
Yep. Yeah, lots of important races happening today. There's a lot of races in California that I'm watching. The interesting thing is folks might not know this. In some states, California, Washington, Oregon, it seems like the Pacific coast states have what's called jungle primaries, and jungle primaries means that everybody is running in one primary. So instead of a Republican primary or a Democratic primary where the Republican Party is picking their nominee and the Democratic Party is picking their nominee, a jungle primary, everybody's running in the same primary, and the top 2 vote getters go on to the general. That means the top 2 vote getters could both be Republicans. The top 2 vote getters could both be Democrats. Or you get a Democrat and a Republican. So it's a really interesting setup that creates some unusual results in on the ballot for November general elections. So what's happening in California is always interesting to watch because there's typically so many people running in races, and you just never know how a jungle primary is going to turn out. So there's a lot of races in California that I've got my eye on, and there's a lot of talk that there could be some unexpected shifts in California, particularly Republicans and folks who are more conservative winning races in traditionally more liberal areas like Hollywood and San Francisco. So it's going to be an interesting primary day with a lot of states choosing their nominees for the November midterm elections.
Yeah, and it might surprise people to know that California, while being one of those states, that's big in blue, the way that, Florida now and Texas are big in red and New York is big in blue. It's easy for someone to think, well, everybody there is a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive.
No.
But the way our districts work, that's not at all the case. In fact, some of the most disturbing people in the Republican Party, some of the Trumpiest, from the current minority speaker, McCarthy, and Devin Nunes and others are from California.
Yeah.
So these California races and Southern California, a place where a lot of people would tell themselves, well, Southern California, that's really sort of the leading edge of, Hollywood and progressivism in LA. Super conservative politically. It's actually the home of Ronald Reagan. That's the longtime home of Richard Nixon. Like, that's old school conservatism that just runs really deep. Yep. So some of those races in Southern California are super important. And they're choosing today what the lineups are going to be. And look, this stuff really matters. For people like us that are nerds in politics, this is like the season or the period of time in which all of the impact of the election time is really being determined. Right? It's sort of like if you're into sports, this is the draft season, right? So how well your sports team is going to do when the season starts is determined by who they have as their players. Or if you're in schooling and teaching, this is the period of time, summer, when teachers are renegotiating their contracts and being hired by different districts. And so what a student is going to experience in third grade come November, that's all being determined right now. So this is the period of time where these decisions are being made. And it's starting to lay out the framework. That's one of the reasons why a lot of us have said, I know that there's a typical pattern for how elections go, of course, but the conditions on the ground do make a difference. So normally the president's party loses seats in the election that happens between presidential elections. That's typical. It's normally how it's gone the last 30 years. And it's been enough to make the control of Congress move since 1992. That's been going on. But sometimes conditions are different. And this year, I think that the slate of candidates is going to be one of the major factors. Sure, it's going to be inflation. Yes, it's going to be some kind of global crisis if it happens or not. Yes, it's going to be determination about how well Joe Biden and the Biden administration is handling big affairs, over and under numbers and approval rates and all that. But it's also going to come down to who those candidates are. Because when you're in a district and you're having to decide, am I going to go out and vote? Or am I going to go out and campaign? Or am I going to make a donation? Am I going to be involved? If this candidate is somebody that you just can't really get yourself going with, you're less likely to be engaged. And that's where voter enthusiasm comes into play. I think what's lining up, Rob, and you've been saying this for a year and a half or 2 years, the problem is that the kinds of people that can make it through the Republican vetting system of the primaries are going to be the Trumpiest and most extreme. And that's one of the reasons we all have to work really hard to make sure they don't get elected, because it's a pre-sort that's happening. We're going to get just the most extreme versions. I think that actually might hurt Republicans in some places where they otherwise, the typical balance should swing. Now, why Republicans haven't suffered irreparable harm is just incredible to me, but they haven't. So that's that. But it could be that the selection of candidates really makes a huge difference in not only at the governor's level and Senate level, but and congressional level, but also at these state legislative levels.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think there's probably a lot of factors that come into play. We've got we finally, speaking of which, we finally have a winner in the Pennsylvania Republican race.
Totally what I was thinking of.
Yep. As you alluded to earlier, that it doesn't mean he's a resident of Pennsylvania, but Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, is now the Republican nominee in Pennsylvania for the United States Senate, and Doug, I've got roots in Pennsylvania. I went to college in Pennsylvania. I went to seminary in Pennsylvania. I married a Pennsylvania girl who has, family that, lives on the same dirt road that, they've lived on their whole lives. And, I know Republican voters in Pennsylvania pretty well, because they're, part of the family. I can't believe they have voted for Dr. Oz to be their nominee for the United States Senate. I mean, in the same shocking way that I could not believe they voted for Donald Trump. Like, these are folks who, you know, hardworking, salt of the earth, driving their, you know, their pickup truck, you know, taking care of their neighbors, like that kind of, I don't know, whatever it is, that Ford truck Americana version of folks, you know, that's these folks. And they picked a quack Hollywood doctor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little shocking. Who doesn't even live in the state? True carpetbagger, right? Like maybe lives in New Jersey, maybe lives in Florida, certainly doesn't live there. You know, is famous from television. And is a lot like Donald Trump in that sense. Like more people feel like they know who that is. He's got that reality show, advice giving, success orientation. But look, the choice that these people you're describing, you know, these kinds of salt of the earth Republican voters in Pennsylvania had was between Mehmet Oz and his dynasty of being a TV doctor personality and a very successful, or at least previously a successful heart surgeon, and a guy who ran a hedge fund. Like the other guy who didn't win as a Republican nominee, the guy who got, you know, 50% less, you know, 1,500 votes less than Mehmet Oz out of, you know, all the Republicans that voted in the primary. It was torn. He was like a non-Trumper, but he was so different from the people that you've described. Yeah. And this is the thing that we keep saying over and over. What's true of Republican voters, I think it's true of all of us, but Republican voters especially don't need their candidates to be like them. They simply want their candidates to like them. And these guys, both the hedge fund, you know, million billionaire who spent $11 million of his own money and didn't win.
Wow.
The primary, spent $11 million on a Senate primary and you don't win. Wow. That's really something. Well, then Mehmet Oz, you know, he tells these people that he likes them and he makes them feel like they're someone that he pays attention to and is important. And for all the hand wringing you and I have done and all the hand wringing that other, you know, people who pay attention to this continue to do, it just keeps coming down to the same thing. Yeah. Who you vote for in an election is not only about identity politics at every level. It really does come down to, do you feel like that person sees you, hears you, and will represent you? And this is what Democrats have to start doing better and better and better. Now, I think Fetterman, who's going to be the Democratic candidate in Pennsylvania, I think he's going to win. I think he literally can do that. I think compared to Mehmet Oz, he can look more people in the eye and say, if you elect me, I'm going to be connected to you and you're going to feel like you have someone who connects with you. It's either that or your party system is so strong and powerful, that's what carries you on. And we have both of those realities that exist in the world, right? I happen to have two senators that I don't feel like represent the people of this state in a personal way at all. They do very well on the national level. They sort of engage and they carry a lot of weight. They just basically use the Democratic Party system in the state to usher them onto victory. They're not winning over people and bringing them over to their side. They're using the party apparatus. But in a lot of places, and Pennsylvania is one of these. This is what you tend to call a swing state. When there's a swing state, it means that neither party is strong enough to guarantee a victory. When that's the case, you really have to put it becomes about the candidate. And look, the same thing in Georgia. I mean, with Herschel Walker running as the Senate candidate there, you know, against personal friend and vote common good supporting Warnock. Look, he is not qualified, capable to do the kinds of things to run for office that are going to get him a win. It just seems impossible. This is what I'm saying, that I think the candidate turnout is actually going to be leaning toward Democrats' favors. I think the the structural situation nationally leans toward Republicans, but I think Democrats actually have the upside on who candidates are more often than I would have thought that they would have. I would have thought maybe they had two things working against them, and we're going to have to pull out, the third, which is running a really great campaign or seeing some sort of situational change in the United States.
Yeah. I will say this. Before, a few weeks ago, when it became obvious that Dr. Oz was going to, be a big player in this Pennsylvania Senate race, I think if you had offered me $1 million, I would not have known his first name. I would have thought that, like, Mehmet. Yeah, I'm not sure I would have been able to come up with Mehmet. I knew who Dr. Oz was, but his first name is Doctor. But now I know that his name is Mehmet. Listen, do you think a couple other factors that I think are gonna play in the midterms? One is the ongoing work of the January 6th Commission, and if there are any bombshells that come from that, and I'm very interested in this live television event on Thursday night. Ooh, I mean, like that.
Well, that's why special programming note, Friday morning, Rob and I will be on talking about what we saw there, because I'm with you. I mean, I am.
Just think about you just set the stage. You think about this. It is a congressional investigatory committee has decided that they are going to go live on television in prime time. Like, this is, I mean, they've got to have DC. Something, right? Like,
congressional hearings. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, they do.
A guy who was a producer of, producer from Good Morning America and Nightline is a special advisor to the committee that's helping organize this live television event. I mean, like, I am super intrigued. So I think that's going to play. I'm
with you. I've just watched a lot of bad television. I mean, there's millions of people that tune into The Bachelor every week. So yeah, the idea that something is television worthy, whether it having a positive effect on the American psyche, I'm still a little iffy. And whether or not people will put a congressional hearing on the same level as, a big hearing. And look, Fox News has decided not to cover it.
Oh,
Fox News has decided, the Fox Industries have decided to put it over on the business channel, on Fox Business. So the one playing, at the Hampton Inn, breakfast buffet. That's, where they get 80% of their audience is just on somebody randomly leaving the television on for Fox Business. So, okay, it's not going to be, and the OAN network and all the MAGA network stuff, they're not going to be covering it. So that world, in fact, Marco Rubio, the former Trump opponent and somebody who said that people are going to have to explain why they would ever have voted for Donald Trump, is now, doing what Republicans are going to do with this and say, oh, it's just a big circus. They've hired a media guy. They're just not telling you the truth. I mean, the degree to which Republicans play this game, the media, you can't trust the media, but vote for Donald Trump, who you met on television, and vote for Dr. Oz, who's a media personality. Yeah. It is a little shocking, right? But you can't, as soon as it gets tagged with that thing that you've just described, a whole lot of people, but I don't think this has ever really been about getting someone to change their mind. I think this fits right in the center strike zone of the work that we do at Vote Common Good, which is they're not trying to get people to change their minds. They're trying to get people whose minds are set that this was wrong to feel motivated, to be rekindled, to move and to act. Look, this is more like in the religion world when churches will run revivals or have a special emphasis week on something. They're not running a revival or having a special emphasis week because truly they're trying to get outsiders. They're trying to stir up the insiders. That's how you do it. And sure, you're going to get a few. That's the narrative, is that you're talking to these other people. But what you're really doing is inspiring yourselves. And there's a lot of people who've been very bothered by what happened on January 6th. They're sickened by it. And this is designed to crystallize their minds and to impassion their enthusiasm to get them to act out. At least I hope so. So for all the times that we're going to be talking about us and any of the rest of us who are listening to this, don't get yourselves all wound up because other people aren't listening to it. I don't think that's where the greatest benefit is going to come in the first place. Look, if you're someone who already said to yourself, well, the election was rigged and therefore whatever maybe some people got out of hand, but it was necessary. You're not in a place where any information you're going to take in is going to tell you that, that this is a problem. I don't know why you would vote, frankly, if elections are rigged. And if someone rigged them in 2020, how do you think they're not rigged in 2022? If China's changing voting numbers, why do you think that's not happening in 2022? If all of this stuff could take place under Republican control in Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and the United States when Republicans were in charge, don't you think that the election would even be more rigged in 2022? I mean, come on, this business about that it's not a fair election. And look, all sides tend to talk about things not being fair elections, and we just have to stop that stuff. It doesn't help anything in our civic lives. But I think this is super important to motivate people like us to keep talking about it and people who really do care about it. What do you think of that theory that this really isn't about changing people's minds, but it's about motivating people whose minds are already set that this is a problem?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Listen, I have long contended that the most important thing in elections is voter enthusiasm. And the conditions on the ground are not set for there to be a lot of enthusiasm on behalf of Joe Biden. He is not an enthusiasm inspiring kind of guy. I think he has led the country well. I think there's a lot to point to in good things that he's done, and he has had a tremendously needed calming effect on our political climate. Yeah. And I also have some pretty strong disagreements with him, and there's a number of things that I wish he would do differently or would have done differently. But Joe Biden, both in terms of his personality and his record as president, is not going to be inspiring a lot of folks to come out in the midterms. So there's got to be something else that spurs voter enthusiasm on behalf of Democrats that can stem the tide of inflation and also stem the tide of just like the normal pattern that happens in midterm elections. I think this January 6th commission and its work really can do that in bringing once again to the forefront of the public's mind, the threat of Donald Trump and Trumpism that caused more people to turn out to vote for Joe Biden than have ever turned out to vote for a presidential candidate. So I think bringing that back to the forefront of people's minds is important. I think the other thing that it is going to spur turnout amongst Democratic voters and have an impact on the election is the impending decision by the Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade, and that is the stripping of people's reproductive rights is going to have the same kind of impact that that people see the impact that the actual tangible thing that happens when Donald Trump and Republicans get their way, the effect it has on people's lives. And so I think that these two things working in tandem can actually have an impact on the election in November.
No, I hear you. And look, enthusiasm is a curious topic, and pollsters try to utilize it a lot. And sometimes they'll even ask questions like, how enthusiastic are you? How excited are you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that doesn't translate into particular activity and action, it doesn't matter. Like, I was super enthusiastic to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I literally had to pull my car over that morning because I was tearing up and couldn't see at the thought that we were going to have a woman president. I was very committed to that. My enthusiasm was through the roof. My vote was still won. And because the Clinton campaign was unable to organize in the state of Minnesota in an adequate way, I couldn't even get a yard sign. There was no infrastructure in this state to get a yard sign. There were no rallies to go to. I couldn't motivate or move anyone. There was no organizing I could even be a part of outside just the typical Democratic go knock on doors and ask other Democrats to turn out. There was nothing going on. All that enthusiasm meant nothing because I couldn't put it into action, right? So sometimes this enthusiasm number, like, I'm going to vote like, what difference does that make? You still got one vote, right? Like, it didn't get boosted. You didn't vote in all caps. It didn't get more impact, right? It was one vote. The question is, can Democrats take these big issues you've raised, which is this overreach from the Supreme Court and what it says about our identity on Roe versus Wade, gun violence and Republicans continuing to not do anything about it,
yes,
the insurrection, and this overall sense, do we really want these people in charge? If that can be mobilized and someone says, I'm moderately impassioned, but I can act, and someone who says, I'm extremely impassioned about this, but I can't act, or I'm extremely impassioned in a district where it doesn't matter. Like, all of those factors have something to do with it. And this is where the organizing has to accompany and can sometimes even overcome the enthusiasm gap. So is there an enthusiasm gap? Maybe. I think after January 6th, after the January 6th hearings come out and play out, if they don't burn out by Labor Day, I think a lot of people will be really frustrated. Look, this indictment that came down yesterday on the leader of the Proud Boys, and I feel like you, I feel a particular connection to the Proud Boys, having sat in a bar with them and argued with them about, the meaning of Black Lives Matter and the future of the country and all. But this indictment of 10 people who organized around the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol on sedition charges, this is, and that the Oath Keepers have also been charged with sedition. This is the kind of thing that really can motivate some people. Again, it's not going to motivate the 40% of people who are hardwired into the Republican Party regardless. No. But that's not what it's about, right?
Right.
What it can do is it can damper some activity, it can damper some organizing when people have to be like, those Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, like, that's not really our thing, right? Having Republicans have to answer for that on a regular basis, that's a really pretty significant thing that's going on. And the fact that you're now going to start to have indictments come down, and that the Justice Department has moved very slowly, but most people don't know the Justice Department's moved slowly. They're not paying attention to this stuff. They're not listening to the Sisters-in-Law podcast and being bothered by the fact that, we haven't moved an indictment forward. Like, that's totally insider baseball stuff that people aren't into. And as soon as it comes on there on people's television and just in the news psyche, and people are like, wow, did you see that they've got one of the first people testifying on Thursday night is going to be this filmmaker who is embedded with the Proud Boys? Did you see this?
Wow.
Okay, so there's a British filmmaker who was a documentarian and was embedded with the Proud Boys with their permission for all the days leading up to January 6th. Side note, there was also a documentary film crew embedded with Roger Stone.
Oh, wow.
And you and I, who have had documentary film crews with us, know they see and hear a whole lot of things. Yeah, so that person's, at least the one with the Proud Boys, the filmmaker, has been working with the January 6th committee on what they learned using footage. That person's going to testify, and there's film footage of them in underground garages the day before on January 5th, talking and plotting and scheming, and microphones on them during the events and putting all of it together, seeing that they actually coordinated and told people, go punch that police officer, so we start this riot. Like, all of that is what's going to get laid out. So this idea that we all think we already know what went on, sure, we think we already know what went on, but it's like a movie or TV show you've seen before, and you rewatch it and you're like, I'd forgotten all about that part, right? And it comes back to you. That's what's going to happen to people. They're going to start to realize, wow, there was so much more going on here. Tangent upon a tangent, though. The fact that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were plotting before January 5th in order to overrun the certification is probably going to serve Donald Trump well. In other words, the people charged with sedition were planning this before Donald Trump stood at that ellipsis and said, go fight like hell. Like, this is going to be something that they're going to use to say there was a whole plot hatched that was not contingent simply on the president. So what it's going to now hinge on was the president in knowledge of this and his lack of action, what he didn't do, and those missing hours of telephone calls and communication. That's where it's going to become a really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that, and this is frustrating early on, that the Justice Department, typically how this works is they start with the low hanging fruit. They start with the the drug dealer on the corner. They don't start with the like head of the drug cartel, and the tendency is to work your way up. And so what we've seen is that that is how the January 6th investigation and from law enforcement has taken place. They've started with kind of the small players, the bit players. We're seeing now with the indictments that happened yesterday of the Proud Boys, we're seeing kind of an increase. We're moving up the pecking order. We're moving up the food chain. And next in line is going to be administration officials, administration advisors, other Congress people, family members of the president, the former president himself. Like that, we are moving in the direction that, could lead to some pretty big indictments.
I hear you. And that's what I hope happens, because it seems to me that would be the justice path.
Yeah.
Unless this is the top of the rung. Unless this is as far as they can get. And the reason they've now put out these indictments and these people, because these people are not cooperating, this is as far as they're going to go. I don't know that. But look, the situation here is there's some conspiracies you can cover up. Government-related conspiracies, when you conspire within the government, is very difficult to cover up once someone's on your trail. If you can keep people off your trail, look at all the special investigators. It's easy to do that when you can keep stuff covered up when nobody's looking. But once investigators or the Justice Department is following a track, what you said and what you wrote and the phone calls you had and the people who were around, that stuff is going to come out. You're not keeping that quiet no matter what. Like, you will either go to jail and someone's going to rat you out. There is no doubt.
Especially if there's embedded documentary film crews.
I mean, in all honesty, the stupidity of these people for not knowing all the way around, the whole Stop the Steal thing is so outrageous. And this is why that it's not about the facts. People don't believe that the election was stolen because they know the facts. It's the narrative that they're in, right? And look, you and I come from a tradition that helps people build narratives of truth separate from the demand of a fact, right? Religious people, Christian people develop a narrative to help people organize and understand their lives in ways that they hope is good and right and truthful without having to argue about every single fact of everything, right? And so when I'm talking to my less inclined friends, but my friends who are less inclined to follow the narrative that I think is important, they can pick apart the Christian story 1,000 ways to Sunday, for sure. No problem. But that's not what a lot of us are doing. We're talking about a larger level of truth about what's gone on. That's what Trump supporting election deniers think that they're up to and actually are doing. They've created a narrative that they believe is truth, and facts are not what's holding that up. The overall structure of it and the need for it and the role that it plays in people's lives, that's what's going on. So when you're in a conversation with someone who holds to something that is not, there's this old argument, you can't rationalize someone out of something that they weren't rationalized into or something like that. You can't argue someone out of something that they weren't argued into. It's a little more sophisticated than that. There's a meta narrative. I mean, to take us back into the mid 90s and the kind of work that some of us were doing, is there's a meta narrative being communicated in which these facts serve a purpose. This is what Kellyanne Conway meant when she said, well, we have alternative facts. Like, we have another set of ideas that serve our storyline that are different than your storyline. And you can take them or leave them. We don't care. That's not what we're just not fussing with that. That's what's going on, right? This is the fictions that we all play. If you play a sport or you do cosplay or you are in a play or you're in a musical, you create a whole set of conditions that are fake, that are not real. You set up a different set of rules and it really serves your life and you love it and you have fun and you do it. This is what's happened with these people in this Stop the Steal. The danger, in my view, is people took a virtual, not virtual in the fake sense, but basically a cosplay experience, dressing up. They're the military. I mean, look, who the frick are the Oath Keepers? Who do these Proud Boys think they are? They really think they're the military? Oh, really? Nice little military. Like, they're playing military. But then they went there and they kept playing that game. And the fact that the Capitol Police didn't, and Rob, I'll tell you, I'm ranting today. The fact that the Capitol Police did not use lethal weaponry is still something I can't quite wrap my head around. Do you have any idea why? Why didn't they fire guns? I truly don't know.
The people attacking were white.
Police shoot white people all the time. They really do. They don't only shoot non-white people. More than 50% of people killed by the police are white people. I don't know if they were given orders not to fire, but that none of them, I mean, I have been around police officers that have put their hands on guns and pulled them in my face for things that I have barely done.
Yeah.
The fact that this operation was not responded to with lethal force is still a question that I asked one of the officers that I met with. It was who's testified for before Congress on this, and I met him in Washington D.C. and I asked him this. I said, "How come you all didn't? Why didn't you pull your guns out? Like, people were being beaten. You thought you were going to die. Like, why didn't you use lethal?"
6 people did die.
Yeah. And they didn't know that, but they were in that level of peril. The things that were happening, you've heard him say it was medieval, the fight. It is still shocking to me.
What did he say when you asked him?
He just said, he didn't really have an answer for it. He's kind of like, man, this wasn't what we did. I don't know. It was, look, talking to these guys, this was weeks afterward. He was still so powerfully shell-shocked. So it is absolutely stunning to me. I mean, there was one officer, we should correct that. There's one officer, the one person who died, one of the women who died, a police officer shot through that door. Remember when they were breaking that door down? Mm-hmm. That didn't end in a bunch of officers firing their guns. Is still rather stunning. Like, what was going on? And the Secret Service is in there and they're not pulling weapons. Like, I don't know. We live in a place where the hair trigger of police on people that are acting aggressively toward the police is all over. And this is a question that I really feel like someone needs to, I don't know, talk about or address. Like, why? Because
you think they'll have a public questioning set time during the hearings on
you think on Zoom I can raise my hands?
Hey, we've got a question from Doug in Minneapolis. Doug would like to know.
How come you didn't shoot anybody? Says the anti-gun activist. But I am really befuddled by the fact that the police, everybody was like, why didn't you bring in the National Guard? And great questions. Why didn't they bring in more higher level military forces? But why are we arming these people with all manner of armory and telling ourselves this is what makes us safe, and it's not used? I don't get it. I'm not even advocating that they did fire weapons. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just, the whole thing is so confusing to me. I mean, my fear on the day, and we'll see what comes out in this, I felt like, because I was watching video of police officers walking intruders into the Capitol and them chit-chatting. And I was like, these officers are in cohorts. Cohorts. What is it when you're in a cahoot with a cohort? When they're in cahoots with that was my fear, right? Is that what's going on here? And then I don't know. Mitch McConnell said way back when they decided to not have a bicameral between the Senate and the House, and bipartisan between two parties and the independents, to not have that kind of a committee. He said, look, we already know what happened. We all saw it. Remember that? That was his excuse. We don't need a committee on this. We all know what happened. No, we don't know what happened. There are so many questions. And this question is, I think, just paramount, is what happened. Because and maybe it's because they said they didn't have weapons, but they literally took police batons and shields and tried to beat them, or with a fire extinguisher. It is so stunning. So I hope that this is what sits out in front of people's minds, that they have to, when they walk into that voting booth in November, they have to be thinking about January, which will almost be 2 years ago. And I hope, I hope it's not what they think about when they walk in the voting booth. I hope it's what they think about when they wake up on election day, whatever day they choose to vote. That's the thing that's sort of front and center in their minds is, do you really want Republicans who don't seem to have a problem with this being the people that are in charge?
Doug, are you watching the TV show Gaslight?
No.
Gaslit. It's on Stars. That's a network.
Right. It's a network. Okay.
Yeah. It is a series about Martha Mitchell, who was John Mitchell's wife, outspoken Arkansas lady, who was married to John Mitchell, who was Attorney General under Richard Nixon. And it tells her story, their story, related to the break-in at Watergate and the ongoing fallout from that. Julia Roberts stars as
I like Julia Roberts
as Martha Mitchell, and Sean Penn stars as John Mitchell. It's really a fascinating show because it follows John Dean as well as G. Gordon Liddy, and it is a quirky, somewhat comedic, really fascinating telling of this story. So as I watch this every Sunday night, as Vanessa and I kind of watch it as our Sunday night show, I just think, like, the incompetence of people, and it's just stunning.
Just long term,
the media circus around it. C, people's attempts to cover it up, and then I have like that old Bible verse rattling around in my head that was used to guilt trip us, as a young person. Know that your sins will find you out. Like, this stuff always comes to light. And I have this sense that, like, okay, just like it did with Watergate, it looked like they were going to get it. I mean, people were sent to prison, like, before that, like, broke as a big deal in the public consciousness. People were sent to prison, and Richard Nixon was reelected as president before all of that, like, broke in the public consciousness. But it always finds the light of day. And so I've got this sense that, this is going to find the light of day as well. And highly recommend Gaslit as a fascinating television show.
Well, now that you describe it, I listened to the podcast, I think, that was about this. Is this right? Do you know this? That it was the same one? maybe it was
Oh,
called
no.
Gaslight. This is about the woman who was kidnapped, right? Because she knew
Yes.
something and they kidnapped her, and like the wife of someone,
Yes.
and they kept her in a hotel
The
room.
wife of the attorney general.
Wife of the attorney general. Like that went on. But so for me as a kid, I didn't know any of those stories. It's not until, an
Yeah.
adult and I hear a podcast that kind of recasts a light on this says, and this was going on. I mean, things were so nutty back in the
Yeah.
Nixon criminal conspiracy ring. There were so many more things. I think you're right that, your sins will find you out, but sometimes, especially in politics, that takes a while.
Yeah.
And it might be that, our children's children are the ones looking back and like, and did you know, like we talk about like 2 years ago, like I just did, like, are people still going to remember this stuff? Sometimes that middle memory is the worst, like the close memory you've got, and then you get a little further out and you sort of, remember things. That middle memory, that can be a problem. And that's going to be the question here. But I feel like what they're going to show on Thursday, especially whatever they come out with in those first 2 hours of that thing, that has to be the thunderbolt. Like if that doesn't grab you and put you in your seat and just make you throw your hands on your face and say, dear God, what is that thing? If that doesn't happen, then, here we are with the Mueller report again, oh, good grief. I waited for that stupid Mueller report for all that time. And yes, Bill Barr lied about it and, sucked a little air out of it. But all in all, turns out that old Mueller, kind of towed the road, kind of towed the line after all. Maybe he wasn't all that, all that honorable in the end of it all, when it all came out anyway. He still just said, well, whatever you need, sir, that's what we'll do. And, they said, nothing we can do here. Can't make a recommendation on any of this stuff. And maybe the committee's gonna come out with something different than this. I sure hope so. Because we're not just talking about politics here. I mean, that's the thing about January. Some things transcend politics. I think Trumpism actually transcends politics. It's a question of what's the future. I've been really obsessed about Steve Bannon. Been obsessed. There was this filmmaker, last name Errol.
I'm in the group text with you. I know that you're obsessed with Steve Bannon.
Because Steve Bannon is the architect of so much of Trumpist thought. He's the one that kind of gave a unifying theory to it. And Steve Bannon's weird world of like being involved with the anti-pope movement of the Catholic Church and the end of Western civilization and the need to burn it all down so that something new can come out of it because we're in the fourth turning of the end of the Western civilization. Like that narrative, that's actually what drives Mike Pompeo and drives Trump and drives all of these people. They actually have a frame of reference where even January 6th fits in there as a necessary good thing for the change in America that needs to happen. That's the story that they're working on and running. So there are people telling you flat out what they think this is all about. And the fact that nut job crowd of people actually had their candidate win the presidency and was the president for 4 years is shockingly scary. So we are not just talking about your typical politics stuff. At least Steve Bannon doesn't think that's the case, and Mike Pompeo doesn't think that's the case, and Betsy DeVos didn't figure we're just doing politics. Hey, we're just arguing about if schools have to report things or not. That's not what they're doing. They're not managing the government. This is not middle management disagreement about the outcome of the the success of the business. This is people with a worldview that is unbelievably bizarre and obscure. And they're the people who are helping to craft all these narratives. So if you're not yet obsessed about Steve Bannon, friends, just look it up. Great article yesterday in The Atlantic that tries to bring this to the popular mind. There's a great audio version of this long article, and then documentaries made about Steve Bannon with Steve Bannon in it, where he just says all this stuff. This is why he does the stuff about it all makes sense. They're not just bizarre rantings of lunatic people. They are very precisely defined rantings of lunatic people.
Yeah.
All right. What else we got? I feel like there were some other things we were just going to give a passing nod to. Dan, we got anything else?
I don't think it was on our list, but you brought up Steve Bannon. That reminds me. Did you see Peter Navarro got arrested?
I did see Peter Navarro got arrested.
Did you see?
He was burning mad, that poor guy.
He was mad about the way he got arrested. How dare they put him in handcuffs? And
who do you think I am? I am above all of this.
Just hilarious.
Just hilarious.
You can't don't arrest me.
Yeah.
Just so funny. I don't know. What other things that we're going to touch on?
That's probably good. We've been at it for an hour and 20 minutes. So
yeah.
All right, Dan, we got anything else? Anything else on your end?
Nope, that's it.
In your dripping skylight of a room?
I got a mop up over here. Rainstorm.
All right, we got to. Well, that's a good reminder. We should mop this. Hey, if you're not all over on our YouTube channel yet, help us out. We're just about ready to. It's like we're playing one of those games. I mean, I haven't played video games truly since I was a kid. So, but we used to play like Super Mario, I think it was.
Yeah.
You got to certain levels and it opened up new abilities, right, for your little character to do. Like you got new things that you could do once you reach levels. So the way a lot of social media is, and that's the way YouTube is, that when you reach a certain number of subscribers, a certain number of watch hours, a certain number of engagements, it starts opening up other things onto your video channels. So we're working hard on that over here. And if you want to help us with that, go over to our YouTube channel, start watching hours and hours of this stuff. And we do have literally hours and hours. Just go into the live playlist and just let it run all day. Just let the droning conversations of live streams from like this or events.
If you like the rants that Doug and I go on here on the podcast, we have like mini rants over there on YouTube as well. That you can get a little snack size rants from us.
That's right. 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes on some things and some other cut up interviews.
I'm dropping one today of a little rant about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Christian nationalism. So check it out.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Boy, she's still running for re-election. How's she doing? Do we know? Is she going to make it, or is she going to just go and give
our man Marcus Flowers is going to knock her off?
All right. She hasn't dropped out yet, though?
No.
All right. I really do feel like we need to make sure we're organized to go down there for that event or for that campaign. We just need to run some events down there and make that happen.
For sure.
Because glory be. I mean, all right. Is that good? All right. We'll talk to you all.